Of course she's guilty, Your Honor.
The policeman's cold voice echoed throughout the courtroom, silencing the crowd. A group of police officers folded their arms and smiled faintly, believing that everything was settled. But in the defendant's row, Alicia Monroe only raised her head, her eyes as calm as water. Alicia Monroe was just a guest lecturer, dragged off the podium in the middle of a presentation, a name that could easily be buried in a pile of files, a face that could be turned into a sensational headline. But Alicia's calmness made the audience realize this was not an easy victim, as they thought. They did not know that the woman carried a secret that could shake the entire system, and in just a few minutes, the balance of power would tilt completely in her favor. The courtroom was packed. The judge's gavel struck loudly, but at the back of the room, a row of police officers chuckled, as if everything was just a play. No one in that room could foresee. Power can flip in the blink of an eye, and often those most confident they've won are the least prepared for the storm ahead. Alicia Monroe's arm was gripped so tightly it hurt. She didn't resist, didn't react, but the officer behind her still twisted the cuffs hard, pressing his knee into her back as if arresting a dangerous criminal. "Shut your mouth," he muttered, shoving her straight into the patrol car. Alicia took a deep breath, her eyes fixed forward. She knew exactly where this script would lead. A sensational headline, a new scandal, and another name they intended to bury in a stack of files. Outside, the university courtyard was still crowded with stunned students, a black guest lecturer, handcuffed in the middle of a lecture. Phones raised, cameras flashed, whispers swelled into a wave of doubt. But Alicia was far too familiar with this game. In a world where the powerful held the pen to write the story, truth was the easiest thing to distort. Behind the wheel sat a bald cop, short and stocky. He kept glancing at her through the rear-view mirror, while his partner sneered, "Too easy, huh?" "Yeah, some people just make things too easy." Alicia tilted her head slightly. "Easy in what way, exactly?" The bald one lifted a small plastic bag containing a white powder. "See this? You were caught red-handed." She looked at the bag, then back at him, calm as a professor waiting for a student to realize their mistake on an exam. "Strange." Alicia gave a faint smile. "Because a minute ago, that wasn't in my hands." He smirked. "You sure about that?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside the window, streets and city lights blurred past. The police station was already ahead, but Alicia knew she wouldn't be there long. Because men like these, they never bothered to look deeper. When the car stopped, she was dragged out, her shoes scraping the concrete. But her expression didn't change. She had been through worse than this. Inside, the procedures unfolded as with any criminal. Photos, fingerprints, names recorded. "You haven't handed over your ID." Alicia tilted her head, reminding them. The officer tapped the keyboard, sneering, "Don't worry, sooner or later you'll be in the system." But then the sneer disappeared. On the screen, information appeared that made him freeze. His face went pale, eyes locked on Alicia as if realizing he had messed with the wrong person. I need to call the captain." The room fell silent. Those who had been laughing suddenly shut up. The door swung open, and a tall man with broad shoulders in a pressed uniform stepped in. His gaze locked instantly on Alicia. In that brief moment, the air shifted. Alicia raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem, Captain?" The man took a deep breath, whispering, "I need to make a phone call." A slow smile spread across her lips. "Go ahead, make the call." For the first time since the cuffs had snapped shut, the room tilted entirely toward Alicia. The arrogance of those men began to crack. And she had only just begun her game. In the holding cell, the cold walls reeked of damp. Alicia leaned back against the steel bench, relaxed as if waiting for a delayed flight, rather than sitting as a prisoner. A few women glanced at her, then looked away. No one dared start a conversation. The metallic screech rang out. "Monroe! Visitor!" A cop barked. Alicia didn't rush. She inhaled slowly, then stood with calm poise. Her escort was still very young, his face carrying the hesitation of a rookie, the kind who joined the force with dreams of justice, but would soon have to choose: grow hardened or walk away. He led her into a small room, bright with fluorescent lights, with only a steel table and 2 chairs. Inside sat a man in a wrinkled suit, tie loosened, waiting. His face bore the exhaustion of years buried in hundreds of lifeless files. "Ms. Monroe," he nodded. "I'm David Keller, court-appointed attorney for this case." Alicia sat opposite, eyes steady. Keller glanced at the guard, signaling he wanted to speak privately, but the cop only crossed his arms. "She's cuffed. She's not going anywhere." Keller sighed but kept his gaze on Alicia, and in that moment, she knew. The game had just moved to a new piece. In the narrow interrogation room, the air was thick. Keller looked at her, then sighed, stepping out as the door closed behind him. When only 2 people remained, he rubbed his hands together as if gathering courage before speaking. "All right. First of all, these charges—" Alicia cut in, her voice calm but firm. "They planted evidence." Keller frowned. "Excuse me. What did you say?" "Drugs." She emphasized each word. "They put it in." Keller pressed his lips into a thin line, trying to keep his composure. "Ms. Monroe, I understand this is a stressful situation." "Stressful?" Alicia gave a cold smile. "I'm not under stress. I'm telling you the truth." Keller rubbed his temples. "Listen, I'm not here to judge. My job is to find a way for you to get the best outcome, and sometimes taking a plea deal is the safest solution." Alicia tilted her head. "So what am I supposed to plead guilty to?" "Possession with intent to distribute." A sharp, short laugh escaped her, not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity of the suggestion. "Look at me." She leaned her elbows on the table, eyes drilling into him. "Do I look like a dealer?" Keller didn't answer. The silence was enough for Alicia to lean back and shake her head. "I guess not." Keller's patience began to wear thin. "I'm trying to help you." "No," Alicia corrected. "You just want to close this file as quickly as possible so you won't have to waste time." The word struck his pride. Keller's jaw tightened. "If this goes to trial, you could end up in prison for years." "If this goes to trial," Alicia replied sharply, "I'll walk out free." Their eyes locked. The silence stretched, taut as a string. Keller narrowed his eyes slightly. You're not just a lecturer, are you?" Alicia didn't blink. "What do you think?" Keller let out a heavy sigh. "Fine, no plea deal. Then, we fight." A half smile curved on Alicia's lips. "Good. Now let's talk about how we're going to take them down." Hours later, the atmosphere in the station had shifted. The laughter from earlier had turned into wary glances and hurried whispers. Alicia could feel the unease creeping into every step, every avoided look. When the cell door swung open, the officer who called her name was no longer rough. He didn't need to drag her anymore. Alicia walked out calmly, her stride relaxed, head held high. The hallway led her past rows of cluttered desks, stacked files, and cold coffee cups. At the end, right before the captain's office door, Bally, the one who had slipped the bag of drugs onto her, stood waiting. His face had lost all its smugness, replaced with unease. The captain's office was larger than the interrogation room, yet felt more suffocating. Filing cabinets lined the walls, a large wooden desk blocked the way. Behind it sat Captain Robert Vance, graying hair, a forehead marked with permanent creases of scowl. "Alicia Monroe," he called slowly. She met his eyes calmly. "Captain," he exhaled, shaking his head. "You really are a thorn in my side." Alicia smiled faintly. "Only when people choose the wrong path." Vance studied her for a long moment, then opened a drawer, pulling out a thick file and slamming it onto the desk. "Your file." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "That was fast." Vance ground his teeth. "Who exactly are you?" She shrugged. "Now that's the million-dollar question, Captain." He slammed his hand on the desk. "We checked your ID, your records. You don't exist." Alicia let out a soft laugh. "You should do your homework better before you play the planting game." The air grew heavier. She leaned forward, her voice lowered but razor-sharp. "Because by the time you realize it, it's already too late." Vance froze. Deep down, he understood. This was no ordinary professor. Not a woman easily buried by the system. They had arrested the wrong person, and now they were diving headfirst into serious trouble. Outside the office, the once bustling station had sunk into unease. Phones still rang, keyboards still clicked, but all of it was drowned out by something heavier. Fear. Vance tapped his fingers lightly on the file, his voice dropping low. "You're not just a lecturer, are you?" Alicia smiled slowly. "I never said who I am." He swallowed hard. He knew that when the data was cross-checked through higher systems, the name Alicia Monroe appeared at a clearance level even he couldn't touch. Everything collapsed from that moment. Vance grabbed the file, slammed it shut. "You, FBI." Alicia gave no reply. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. "What level?" She only tilted her head. A single word slipped from his lips, small as a curse. "Director." The world inside the room tilted. That name weighed like stone. They hadn't just arrested an agent. They had handcuffed the one who gave the orders. Outside, the laughter of officers celebrating still echoed. They had no idea the sword was hanging over their heads. "This is bad." Vance swallowed. Alicia raised an eyebrow. "Bad for who?" He didn't answer. The silence said it all. She leaned back, calm as if giving him more time to digest the truth. But then her voice rose, light as casual talk. "Tell me, Captain, do you know just how dirty your men really are?" Vance's eyes sharpened. "I run a clean unit." Alicia glanced through the glass window at the officers who had cuffed her, laughing, fist bumping as if they had just won. She only nodded slightly, the corner of her lips curving. "If you believe that, then you haven't looked closely enough." Laughter from the break room spilled out, loud as though they'd won a prize. Alicia turned back, staring straight at Vance. "No," she said slowly. "You don't know at all." Vance frowned. "You don't know anything about my unit." Alicia leaned forward, her voice lowered, sharp as a blade. "I know 2 of your officers just stuffed drugs into the bag of a federal official. I know the prosecutor is ready to sign the indictment, and I also know," her eyes flashed, "if I'm not out of here in the next 5 minutes, 1 phone call from me will set this whole station on fire." Vance's fingers clenched tight on the desk. He understood that if this reached Washington, his career wouldn't just end. It would be erased. His badge, his unit, his honor, all turned to ash. Alicia watched him like someone observing a train slowly derailing. Finally, Vance shifted, exhaling heavily. He pulled the key from his belt, slid it into the lock. The metallic click rang out, dry and final. Alicia rubbed her wrists, exhaling softly, not out of relief, but from quiet satisfaction. She rose to her feet. Vance remained seated, his face as though he had just watched the ground split open beneath him. "My suggestion," Alicia said smoothly, "you call those 2 officers in here before I have to." Vance didn't resist. He reached for the radio. His voice thundered through the station. "Dunlap, Torres, report to the captain's office immediately." The laughter in the break room cut off. Alicia didn't wait. She stepped outside, striding past the desks. Eyes followed her, startled, wary. Dunlap, the bald one, and Torres, his accomplice, walked toward the office, smiles still on their faces. But when they saw her standing there, hands free, Their expressions froze. Torres slowed. Dunlap lost his smirk. Alicia kept her face cold, tilting her head slightly as they passed. "Enjoy it," she whispered. Dunlap frowned. "Enjoy what?" Her eyes pierced him, dark and unyielding. "The last 5 minutes, before your career's end." Before he could respond, Vance's voice boomed like a hammer. "Close the door!" The sound of the door slammed shut. Alicia turned back to the large room, sweeping her gaze across the officers. Some averted their eyes, some whispered, the whole atmosphere drowning in a fog of unease. Then, a clear voice rang out from the main entrance. "Director Monroe." Everything froze. Alicia turned. A man in a dark suit stood tall, flashing a federal badge. "Ma'am, we're here to take you back." A thin smile crossed Alicia's lips. She nodded, stepped forward, leaving behind a building already beginning to crack. The black SUV slid away in silence. City neon lights stretched into long streaks across the window. Alicia flexed her wrists, still feeling the ghost of the cuffs. "Are you all right, Director?" The driver glanced through the mirror. She didn't answer right away, her fingers tapping lightly on her knee. Calculations still whirled in her mind. "I'll be fine," she whispered. The car turned into the underground garage of the federal building. Guards were already waiting, agents standing in rigid formation. Some eyes held relief, others anger. But no one asked. They already knew. A man in a navy blue suit approached, his expression tense. "Director Monroe, the Attorney General is waiting for you." She gave a slight nod, striding into the private elevator, going straight to the top floor. The doors opened to a long conference room with glass walls overlooking the city. At the dark wooden table, the Attorney General, silver-haired, eyes weary, sat beside a woman in a black suit, the head of Internal Affairs. Alicia entered, sat across from them. Silence pressed heavy. Then the Attorney General exhaled sharply, placing both hands on the table. "You've just created a major mess, Director." Alicia stared straight, unblinking. "No, I've just exposed a major mess." The woman beside him leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "The officers who arrested you have confessed. They admitted planting evidence, taking bribes, coercing witnesses. The entire police department has been placed under investigation. Captain Vance held on for a few minutes, but when he saw your file, he collapsed. The prosecutor, the one eager to push this case, has also been suspended. Turns out he has a history of winning questionable cases." Alicia nodded lightly, her gaze deep as though seeing the larger picture unfold. "So, the dominoes start to fall, faster than I expected." "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice outwardly calm but lined with steely resolve. "We've just unmasked a system, a network, a machine designed to push innocent people into a grinder. This won't be the last time it happens." The Attorney General sighed, his eyes flickering over her like someone observing a strange object. "No, it won't," he replied. Then added a weighty question. "Do you understand the consequences of what you've just done?" Alicia tilted her head slightly, her tone vague but unyielding. "You've just turned a local incident into a federal scandal. The press will swarm. The public will demand accountability. This won't disappear in silence." Her smile was slow but sharp. "Good." The Attorney General pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling long. "Do you realize how many enemies you're making?" Alicia's expression didn't change. "If they're my enemies, they were never people worth my concern." Silence dropped like a curtain until the head of Internal Affairs straightened, nodding slightly. "The decision is yours, Director." Alicia drew a deep breath, feeling the tension in her body settle. "My decision," she said, rising and adjusting her jacket lapel. "Prepare the press." The room froze. The Attorney General and Internal Affairs frowned. "You mean to go public?" Alicia smiled like someone who had calculated every move. "They already made it public. The cameras were rolling from the moment they shoved me into the car. The world has already seen." The answer no longer lies inside a closed office. The Attorney General hesitated, but he knew she was right. The story was out. The only path now was straight through the storm. Alicia turned toward the window, the city sprawling beneath her. Not broken, just awaiting a reckoning. Hours later, before a wall of microphones, cameras, and blazing lights, Alicia stepped onto the podium with a calm yet commanding voice. "Good evening," she began, her tone carrying evenly across the packed hall. "As many of you know, I was unlawfully arrested yesterday." Whispers rippled, but she continued. "The officers responsible have been arrested. An investigation into systemic corruption in that police department is underway. But let's be clear, this isn't just one isolated case. This is a pattern, a model that has existed far too long." Cameras zoomed tight, reporters holding their breath. Every day, innocent people, most from Black and brown communities, are shoved into a system built against them, not because they committed crimes, but because corruption thrives where no one is watching. I'm here to say, I am watching. A heavy silence fell. "I may be the director of a federal agency." She looked directly into the camera. "But this is not just my mission. It's all of ours. Justice does not belong to the privileged few. It belongs to everyone. This ends now." Her words landed like a command. The press room erupted with questions, but Alicia stepped back from the microphones, escorted away by agents. Her work didn't end with a few sentences. It had only begun. Behind the lights and headlines, a chain of decisive actions snapped into motion. The officers who orchestrated it were detained. Indictments were suspended. Those tied to past easy wins suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. In the hours that followed, the press dug deeper. Public outrage swelled, and piece by piece, the web of corruption began to unravel. Alicia knew this was not the final victory, but the beginning of a chain of legal, political, and moral battles. She had released the snowball. It would roll, collide, grow larger, and could not be stopped by the clumsy hands of those who thought they held power. As she stepped through the glass doors of the federal building, all eyes turned toward her, not with pity or contempt anymore, but with expectation. The question now was not whether she would win, but how many networks would collapse before a new order of justice was built. The news spread like wildfire. Evening broadcasts opened with the image of Alicia Monroe standing before dozens of microphones, declaring, "This ends now." Headlines flooded the screens. FBI director unlawfully arrested. Major investigation into police corruption. Justice system shaken. The next day, members of Congress could no longer stay silent. A special committee was formed to open an emergency hearing. Summons letters reached the offices of the Attorney General, the state's chief prosecutor, and even the FBI itself. Congress wanted answers. How could the director of the FBI be dragged off the street like a criminal with planted evidence, right before students and cameras? Meanwhile, human rights lawyers quickly seized the moment. They filed class actions on behalf of hundreds who had been arrested under the same script as Alicia. Coincidentally discovered evidence, coerced. Confessions and heavy sentences. The map of America suddenly lit up with hotspots of investigation. In Washington, political pressure compressed like a bomb. Some senators demanded an independent investigation of entire local police forces, while the opposition accused the government of losing control of the justice system. The press called it a minor constitutional earthquake. But those Alicia had exposed did not sit still. In the shadows, former officials who had profited from easy win convictions began leaking disinformation, fabricating stories to smear her. Conservative media outlets pushed headlines, FBI director overstepping authority, Alicia Monroe undermining public trust. A war of words erupted, and Alicia became the focal point. Hailed as a hero by some, attacked as a traitor by others. Inside the federal office, Alicia quietly prepared for the next round. In front of her was not just a handful of corrupt officers, but a network entrenched for decades. And she knew. The next step would no longer play out in dark holding cells, but under the bright lights of Congress and before millions of eyes. 3 days after the press conference, the United States Capitol became the nation's center stage. Hundreds of reporters crowded the steps. On television tickers ran the words, "Judiciary Committee summons FBI Director Alicia Monroe." Inside, the hearing room blazed with lights, the high ceiling echoing with the clatter of keyboards and live broadcast cameras. A row of senators sat in a line, facing Alicia, her expression calm, dark hair tied back, dark suit, eyes sharp as blades. The committee chair struck the gavel. "Director Monroe, do you understand that your testimony today will be recorded and preserved as part of the national record?" "Yes," she answered, voice steady. A veteran senator, his tone thick with skepticism, shot the first strike. "You've turned a county-level incident into a federal crisis. Do you realize you've undermined the credibility of the entire law enforcement system?" Alicia stared straight ahead. "No, I exposed those who undermined it. There is a difference." The chamber buzzed. Cameras zoomed tight on her face, unmoved. A young congresswoman, shaped by the human rights movement, leaned toward the microphone. "Director Monroe, can you clarify? Was this incident isolated or a symptom of a system?" Alicia drew a deep breath, letting the silence weigh before replying. "This was not an accident. This is a pattern, a machine. From Dunlap and Torres in a small county, to dozens, hundreds of other names we have yet to speak aloud. People of color are pushed into the gears of injustice not because they are guilty, but because corruption is allowed to thrive." A wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. Some senators frowned in discomfort, others nodded in agreement. The committee chair interjected, "Do you have evidence for these claims?" Alicia gently slid a thick file forward. "This is only the beginning." Cameras panned down, lenses zooming in on the cover stamped "classified." The atmosphere strained to the breaking point. A dissenting congressman grabbed a microphone, his voice harsh. "Director Monroe, do you realize you are threatening public trust in the legal system? You are undermining national order." Alicia tilted her head, calm but razor-sharp. "If trust only exists when we hide the truth, then it is not trust, it is illusion. And I was not hired to maintain illusions." The hearing room erupted in whispers. Reporters in the hallway immediately began furiously messaging. The TV ticker ran, "Monroe, I was not hired to maintain illusions." The hearing was not yet over, but Alicia had already flipped the script. From a potential defendant, she became the one interrogating the system before the nation. The gavel struck. The air in the hearing room, already tense, felt suffocating. An opposing congressman sprang to his feet, clutching a thin file, his voice high. "Director Monroe, you dare speak of integrity and justice? Then explain this." He raised a stack of papers, densely printed with numbers and lines. Cameras immediately zoomed in. "This recording," he emphasized, "shows you ordering an out-of-scope campaign, arresting innocent people to hit metrics." The chamber exploded. Murmurs spread. Other members joined in. "What? Unbelievable!" Camera lenses fixed on Alicia. For a moment, viewers watching at home seemed to expect her to crack, but Alicia didn't blink. She leaned forward, opened the file in front of her, then spoke in a steady voice, loud enough to carry through the room. "This recording is fake." Silence snapped. The congressman slammed his hand on the desk. "Do you have evidence? This document came from an anonymous source inside the FBI." Alicia slowly lifted the thick file she had prepared and slid it toward the committee chair. "The original copy, unedited, with timestamps and authentication codes. Compare them. The tape you presented has been spliced. Deep fake technology is not sufficient to fool our verification system." A technical specialist was summoned on the spot, plugged in headphones, and ran the software. The large screen in the room projected the two clips side by side, the fake and the original. The differences were obvious. The chamber shook. The young congresswoman pounded the desk. "Someone inside this institution is trying to frame Director Monroe." Reporters in the hallway surged forward, microphones thrust toward the door. The TV ticker read, "Forgery exposed live at Congress." Alicia sat upright, her cold gaze sweeping across the row of opposing members. "I told you, this problem is not limited to one police department. It runs far deeper. And if someone within these halls of power wants to bury the truth, they will fail right here, today." The chamber erupted. Some members rose to applaud. Others hammered gavels to restore order. But the wave had spread. Not only within the room, but across every screen, every headline, every conversation in the country. The hearing ended, but the aftershock rolled out like a tsunami. That very night, news channels replayed the moment Alicia turned the tide, exposing fabricated evidence live in Congress. Headline after headline. FBI director turns the tables in hearing. Fabricated evidence unmasked, live on national air. Justice system faces crisis of confidence. Public outrage ignited. Outside, crowds gathered at the Capitol steps, holding banners calling for reform. On social media, the hashtag #Justice Not Illusion trended globally. But in the shadows, those who had lost power began to act. That night, a torrent of anonymous emails leaked, accusing Alicia of abuse of power, using the FBI for political ends. Opposing media outlets ran continuous stories, sowing doubt. In her private office, Alicia stood by the window, looking down at the city awash with protesters. An advisor entered, voice worried. "They won't stop. Tonight is only the beginning. There are powerful people who will view you as an existential threat." Alicia did not turn back. Her voice was soft but firm. "Good. Because if someone sees me as a threat, it means I'm on the right path." Inside FBI headquarters, loyal agents began tightening security. Classified files were reviewed, internal communications scrutinized channel by channel. Signs of an insider leak emerged, the same source that had supplied the fabricated evidence during the hearing. Meanwhile, Congress announced the expansion of its investigation into a special committee on justice reform, with Alicia summoned as the primary witness. Many senators, though reluctant, were forced to admit if she could publicly expose forged evidence, no one could look away any longer. But Alicia understood. The battle had left the streets, left the halls of Congress. Now it reached into the corridors of power, where not everyone showed their face. She whispered to herself, eyes fixed on the night outside. Today's hearing was only the opening shot. The real battle is just beginning. The news frenzy triggered a domino effect. The next morning, dozens of major newspapers ran the same headline, "Time for Reform." On social media, millions shared the video of Alicia declaring, "Justice is not an illusion. It belongs to everyone." Under mounting pressure, the Department of Justice formally announced a comprehensive investigation into police forces in at least 7 states. Departments once deemed untouchable now had every file, every old case pulled under scrutiny. Dozens of wrongful convictions were reopened. Congress, battered for weeks, was forced to act. An emergency reform package, the Justice Transparency Act, was drafted. Every arrest must be monitored on camera from start to finish. Prosecutors subject to random audits by an independent counsel. Victims of wrongful convictions guaranteed compensation and free legal support. An unprecedented scene unfolded across cities. Citizens poured into the streets, not to protest, but to show support. They carried photos of Alicia Monroe as the symbol of an awakening. Chants rang out, "No more illusion, only truth." Even within the FBI, young agents publicly pledged allegiance to reform. "We stand with justice, not with power," one group declared at a live press conference. Alicia, at the center of the storm, did not claim to be a hero. She appeared briefly, repeating one message: "This fight is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us." And today, we proved that change is possible. In that moment, from a wrongful arrest, a black woman handcuffed in the street, Alicia Monroe had become the face of a national reform movement. A system that had swallowed millions of lives was now forced to change under the light of millions of unblinking eyes. That late afternoon, the Capitol cast its long shadow across the avenue. Crowds still filled the steps, holding banners, raising phones, voices crashing like waves. Justice belongs to all. No more illusion, only truth. The heavy wooden doors swung open. Alicia Monroe stepped out, composed, her black suit stark against the sea of people. 2 agents flanked her, but she did not bow her head. Instead, she lifted it high, her gaze locking with every lens, every waiting face. For a heartbeat, the crowd fell silent, then erupted. Cameras zoomed in on her hands, no longer cuffed, only lightly holding the edge of her jacket, as if to remind herself that this freedom must be protected at all costs. The narration rose, overlaid with slow-motion images. There are moments that define not just a person, but a nation. And the day Alicia Monroe walked through those doors, America's history turned onto a new path. The camera panned upward, capturing the vast scene. Thousands cheering, flags waving, the Capitol's facade bathed in golden evening light. Alicia paused, smiled faintly, then stepped forward into the sunset. The screen faded out, leaving only her final words from the hearing echoing. If trust only exists when we hide the truth, then it is not trust, it is illusion. And I was not hired to maintain illusions. On black screen, the documentary logo appeared. This is not the end. It's the beginning. The story of Alicia Monroe shows us, even in a system that seems untouchable, there are people willing to stand up, to face the truth, and to force the machine to change. This was not just a legal battle, but a fight for justice for everyone. But what about you? Do you believe that one individual, even alone, can shake an entire system? And if you were in Alicia's place, would you choose silence or confront it to the very end? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue exploring where justice and truth collide. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person daring to speak the truth, to change history itself.